Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going into a really chilling case from modern London. It's a story that honestly feels ripped from the headlines, but it's got these layers of terrifying oversight underneath. We're talking about a serial killer who managed to operate, well, largely under the radar. He used technology, the kind many of us use every single day, to find his victims. It's a disturbing look into, human psychology, deception, and unfortunately the systemic failures that let a predator roam free.
That's right. Our deep dive today focuses on Stephen Port, a man who eventually became known as the Quiet Predator. He used dating apps, Grindr being a key one, to commit this horrifying series of rapes and murders. So our mission here is really to unpack the shocking details of his life, his methods, which were chilling, and the crucial oversights. These oversights tragically allowed him to continue, leaving this trail of devastation behind him. It really shakes you.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. Stephen Port's story. He was born Stephen Port on February 22nd, 1975, in Southend. Grew up with his sister, Sharon, in what seemed like a fairly normal family environment. When he was just one, the family moved to Dagenham, over in East London. Now, from what the sources say, there wasn't any reported abuse inside the family during his childhood, but he was consistently described as incredibly shy. Quiet. So quiet, in fact, that his teachers apparently wondered if he had some kind of hearing impairment because he barely spoke. He was a real loner, preferred his own company, and sadly, that often made him a target for bullies.
It's quite striking, isn't it, that early social isolation, the bullying, it provides crucial context. There's also the fact that Stephen's father was known to be gay, and this later led to a lot of discussion, about whether it influenced Stephen's own sexual identity. But that feeling, that sense of being marginalized, maybe picked on, that lack of control in his early life, it feels like something that might have fueled a deep-seated need for dominance later on.
Right. So after school, he gave art college a try at 17. But he dropped out pretty quickly. Apparently the tuition fees were just too high. He eventually found his way into working as a chef. Then, in his mid-20s, he came out as gay to his family and friends. And by all accounts, they were accepting, which is, a positive point, a very dark story. But he lived with his parents until his early 30s. Does that suggest something? Maybe a prolonged dependence?
It certainly could, yeah. It aligns with this picture we're getting of someone who struggled with social connections, perhaps independence. It implies maybe a lack of significant outward independence during those really formative adult years. And you mentioned those quirks, the details about him with his parents.
Yeah, exactly. Neighbors apparently observed this really unusual attachment he had to toys. Like playing with them obsessively. It made him seem almost like a child in an adult's body, despite his age.
Yeah.
But then there's this contrast. He kept himself in really good shape, worked out regularly, this physical presence, this build. That's something he definitely used later, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Think about that mix. Deep social awkwardness, this possible desire for control from childhood, and then this sort of childlike element in his personal life. Now imagine someone like that suddenly getting access to a whole new world of interaction online. This is really where Port's story takes that incredibly dark turn. He finds a new way to engage, but it's twisted into something predatory.
And that brings us to 2006. Port finally moves out of his parents' place, gets a flat in Barking, a new level of independence. And this timing lines up directly with the huge growth of the internet and specifically online dating platforms like a perfect storm. So Port just dives right in, registers on loads of dating sites and apps, Grindr included. And he didn't just use his real self. He crafted these elaborate fake profiles, pretending to be anything from a special ed teacher to a Marine, a salesman, even an adult film actor or an Oxford graduate. He even wore wigs sometimes, trying to hide his boldness when he met people, clearly boosting his confidence, building this false persona.
It really highlights how the internet became, the perfect tool for someone like Port. If you're unable to interact confidently or authentically face-to-face, it offers this seemingly low-risk way to connect. But for him, instead of finding genuine connection, it became purely a vehicle for deception and ultimately absolute control.
Yeah, his MO was chillingly consistent. He'd lure men, mostly for sex. But if his dates didn't want the same thing, or if he just wanted to exert that power, he'd drug them. What was it about that method, that drug, that made it so effective?
Yeah.
And so hard to spot at first.
He primarily used GHB, gamma-hydroxybutyrate. It's colorless, odorless, known infamously as a date rape drug. partly because of its sedative effects, but also because it can cause amnesia. In lower doses, it can apparently increase arousal, which might have been part of his initial plan sometimes. But in higher doses, it's incredibly dangerous. It can be fatal. And the really insidious part is how easily it can be slipped into a drink without someone noticing.
And he definitely used it. We see this pattern emerging with his early victims, almost like he was honing his technique. Back in 2012, there was a 19-year-old known as Mr. A, met Port on Grindr. Port gave him some wine, he felt dizzy. Mr. A actually managed to get away. But a medical exam later confirmed sexual assault. Police recorded it, but nothing. No investigation followed. Then, June 2014, a 20-year-old, Mr. B, met via a dating site. Drugged, woke up disoriented. Port played the helpful friend, walked him to the station. Again, not enough evidence for conviction. And the third victim, Mr. C, similar story, drugged, no memory. It's just crucial to stress this point. Despite these incidents, these clear patterns of drugging, assault, Port wasn't caught. When you look back at these early reports, were the red flags obvious? Was it just hard to see the pattern, or was something else going on?
Well, hindsight is 20/20, but the patterns, they seem undeniable now. These were clear warning signs, not just isolated events. This police in action, these reports that weren't fully investigated. It tragically paved the way for much worse. The initial responses just didn't connect the dots, and that proved to be a fatal oversight.
Which brings us, devastatingly, to the first confirmed murder. A clear escalation. June 15th, 2014, Stephen Port contacts Anthony Walgate, a 23-year-old fashion student who also did some escort work. He found him on sleepyboy.com. Port offered him £800, quite a lot of money, to stay overnight. Just 4 days later, June 19th, 2014, early morning, 4:08 a.m. Port himself calls the police. Anonymously reports an unconscious man. This man was Anthony Walgate, found sitting upright near Port's flat, but with these strange bruises and cuts on his body.
And this is really where that critical series of missteps begins. The initial autopsy shows high levels of GHB, so police quickly conclude, okay, overdose, case closed. That initial judgment, especially given those suspicious injuries, had devastating consequences.
But Anthony's mother, Sarah Sack, she was just incredible, so determined. She was actually on holiday in Turkey when she got the news, flew straight back, and she flat out refused to accept the overdose story. She kept pointing to her son's injuries, the bruises, the cuts. It was her persistence, really, her refusal to let it go, that eventually pushed the police to look again. And when they did, they found Port's number on Anthony's phone, matched the anonymous caller. So they questioned Port. He admits being with Anthony, but sticks to the story. Anthony's just overdosed.
It's still quite staggering, though, that even with all that, Port was only charged with perverting the course of justice, for lying to the police. And then he was quickly released on bail. How does that even happen? Especially when, as we later found out, his laptop was already with the police.
It's truly baffling. The laptop, which had videos of him assaulting other victims, it was in police possession. But incredibly, it wasn't examined for 10 months. 10. This oversight meant Port was just free to continue. It's heartbreaking.
And there was this growing suspicion, wasn't there, that maybe the police dismissed the case partly because of Anthony's sexuality and his work. Does that suggest a bias?
That's exactly the accusation that came out later, very strongly. It suggests that biases, whether conscious or unconscious, meant the case just wasn't given the seriousness it demanded, and that failure paved the way for more tragedy.
And the horror did continue. Shockingly, August 25th, 2014. Port murders Gabriel Kovari. Gabriel was 22, from Slovakia. He'd been staying with Port temporarily after falling out with a friend, and apparently Gabriel had refused Port's sexual advances, so Port injected him with a lethal GHB dose. Then Port starts his elaborate cover-up, uses a fake online account to tell Gabriel's friends he'd left the UK. Then, August 28th, he moves Gabriel's body, wraps him in a bedsheet, takes him to St. Margaret's Churchyard just 500 meters away, and he stages the scene meticulously, props Gabriel's body against a wall, puts sunglasses on him, places a GHB bottle nearby, all to look like an overdose. Gabriel's body was found by a woman walking her dog, Barbara Denham. She initially thought he was maybe just drunk, passed out, but then realized something was wrong. Called the police, and again, the conclusion. Overdose. Gabriel's former housemate, John Pappy, contacted the police. He pointed out the similarity to Anthony Walgate's death, but his concerns ignored. Again, the sheer audacity, it's astounding. And then the third victim, Daniel Whitworth, just a month later, September 18th, 2014, Port murders Daniel. His body is found by the same woman, Barbara Denham, in the same churchyard, chillingly, just 5 feet from where Gabriel's body was discovered. It's almost unbelievable the pattern wasn't screaming at them by this point.
And here's where the deception gets, truly brazen. Alongside the usual GHB bottle, they find a forged suicide note next to Daniel's body. This note was this audacious attempt by Port to frame Daniel for Gabriel's murder. claiming Daniel felt guilty, so he took his own life. It even explicitly said that Daniel's last sexual partner, which was Port, wasn't involved.
But the inconsistencies were just glaring. They should have screamed foul play. The note misspelled Daniel's own surname. And Daniel and Gabriel had never even met each other, so the whole confession made no sense. And crucially, Port's DNA was found on Daniel's clothes. How could these huge discrepancies just be dismissed?
It's a profound question, isn't it? And it points directly to a critical failure in those initial investigations. Despite these massive red flags, the police closed the case again. Suicide. Sarah Sock, Anthony's mother, she kept pushing, highlighting the similarities. But her pleas just met with, well, devastating indifference. The official story wasn't being properly challenged.
What's even more chilling, if that's possible, is that even after being charged with perverting the course of justice for Anthony's death, Port gets released, and he continues his pattern. He sexually assaults 3 more men, though thankfully none fatally this time. Then he served just 3 months of an 8-month sentence, released in June 2015, free again. Then comes the 4th and final, murder. September 12, 2015. Port meets Jack Taylor, a 25-year-old forklift driver, on Grindr. There's clear CCTV footage of them together on September 13th. Jack's family later confirmed he was strongly anti-Jorg. He actually wanted to be a police officer, which makes the official story even harder to stomach. Jack's body was found. Where else? The same churchyard as Gabriel and Daniel, staged again. GHB bottle, a syringe this time too, his mobile phone nearby. All designed to look like yet another overdose.
So finally, after these repeated patterns, the ignored pleas from families, this mounting death toll, it reached a breaking point. The family's relentless pressure, especially Sarah Sack's incredible fight, combined with intense public outcry, it finally forced the police to change teams, to conduct a proper, thorough investigation. It took 4 murders, but the demand for justice finally broke through.
And the net finally closed in. Police reviewed all the CCTV properly this time, connected Port to all 4 victims. They also finally went back to Port's laptop, discovered those rape videos that had been sitting there unexamined for over 10 months. Stephen Port was arrested on October 15th, 2015, charged with 4 murders. Despite everything, he denied it all, claimed he was innocent. In October 2016, the verdict came. Stephen Port was convicted. 4 counts of murder, Anthony, Gabriel, Daniel, and Jack, plus 7 counts of rape and drugging. He received a life sentence with no minimum term, a whole life order. And to this day, he maintains his innocence from prison.
But the question remains, the really crucial one, why did it take so long? An investigation by the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, found that 9 of the 17 officers involved performed below standard. Yet, incredibly, no major disciplinary action. Some were even promoted later. These findings, combined with the public anger, fueled those accusations of homophobia, of institutional negligence. The feeling was strong that the cases weren't taken seriously enough, perhaps because the victims were gay men, some involved in sex work. Even the forensic pathologists faced scrutiny for those initial quick overdose rulings.
And the GHB source. That was discovered almost by accident, wasn't it? Port's supplier, a man named Gerald Works, was identified through a totally unrelated investigation. Turned out Works was also a sex offender using GHB. His link to Port just came out sideways.
When we try to understand Port's motivation, experts often point back to that need for power and control, likely stemming from his childhood experiences of bullying, feeling suppressed, unable to maybe express his true self. Lacking the social skills for genuine connection, the internet offered him the space to create false identities, exert dominance over others, something he perhaps never felt he had in his own life. It's a really chilling look at how early experiences can twist into something so dangerous.
This deep dive into Stephen Port, it's just incredibly chilling, isn't it?
Yeah.
It shows how someone seemingly shy, isolated, could become such a calculated predator, and just as importantly, how systemic failures, these terrible oversights, tragically allowed his crimes to continue for so long, leaving such devastation.
Yeah, the Port case is a really stark reminder, I think, of the dangers that can hide in plain sight, and how biases, whether we're aware of them or not, can have these devastating real-world impacts on justice. It really forces us to look beyond assumptions, demand thoroughness, demand impartiality from the systems meant to protect everyone.
And as we all navigate this increasingly digital world, where connections are made with just a swipe, and identities are so easily curated, what does the story of Stephen Port tell us about that fine line between trust and deception, and maybe about our collective responsibility, too, to ensure justice truly is for all? Something to think about. Thank you for diving deep with us today.